Let me say a little more about inquiry and advocacy. You start exploration by inquiring into the point of view of others. It's more helpful to start with inquiry and listening than advocacy because it really lets another person know that you're interested in their point of view. Your intent isn't to argue for your own way or impose your own way on them, but to understand how they see things. Starting in this way allows them to be more open and more likely to want to engage in the conversation, and it builds trust and goodwill. Inquiry is active, not passive. It's more than even good listening. It includes good listening, but it's even more because during inquiry, you're really trying to draw other people out to genuinely understand their point of view. This is difficult because it's easy for you to be hooked into defending and attacking or wanting to explain your own point of view. But in inquiry, you inquire by asking questions or making statements that encourage people to be self-disclosing. And I'll encourage the specific skills that go with this a little bit later. You acknowledge their point of view, which isn't the same thing, by the way, as agreeing with them. Acknowledging is letting them know that you're listening and that you're hearing what they're saying. You do it by saying something like, let's see if I understand what you're saying. Is this how you see things? Here are the facts as you see them, and so on. Well, the second skill is to advocate your point of view, clearly yet non-dogmatically. The concept of advocating clearly yet non-dogmatically seems to be a bit of a contradiction, but it really isn't. You need to be clear and assertive in the presentation of your own ideas, and yet at the same time you remain open to input with a willingness to be influenced by other people. During this step, you talk about your understanding of the situation, often in two parts. This is how I view the situation, or in other words, my perceptions and assumptions, or these are my thoughts and feelings, and this is how I arrived at my perceptions. And finally, you end advocacy with inquiry, especially when you see that people are shutting down or going into maybe a resistant mode. It's helpful to conclude advocacy by opening up inquiry again, letting them talk about their thoughts, actively seeking out alternatives and disconfirming views. So you continue back and forth between inquiry and advocacy until you sense that each person has an understanding of the views of the other. This doesn't necessarily, again, as I've said before, mean we agree on all aspects of the situation. But if you've been sincere in building a pool of shared understanding, you've influenced each other and are most likely to begin seeing the situation somewhat differently than when you began the process. As people learn this process, they sometimes object because they think it takes too much time. And it's true, the process takes more time in the short run, but also results in a much better relationship and better understanding of complex situation and results in better solutions. It actually saves time in the long run by avoiding long-standing misunderstandings, unproductive conflict, and infighting. Sometimes coming to an understanding is as far as you need to go in the process of dialogue. You've cleared the air, so to speak. Simply understanding one another may be sufficient. But most of the time, you need to move on to the next phase of the process because you also want to come to a mutual decision, a solution, or identify actions that you want to take.